What if some of horror's greatest cult classics were once considered embarrassing failures? Studios blamed audiences, critics attacked the filmmakers, and empty theaters appeared to settle the argument. But ticket sales only measure one moment. These 19 films stumbled when they arrived, yet each one eventually found an audience that understood exactly what frightened, amused, or fascinated it. Before the countdown begins, subscribe to our channel, because forgotten films deserve another night on the big screen. Number 19. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975. A flat tire sends the painfully ordinary Brad and Janet into a castle where every rule of polite society immediately collapses. Inside, Dr. Frank N. Furter unveils Rocky, a muscular creation presented as the main attraction at the strangest party imaginable. The film combines haunted house imagery, science fiction, rock music, comedy, and theatrical performance, making it nearly impossible for the studio to explain through normal advertising. Its original theatrical opening failed to attract a broad audience, and several planned engagements were canceled. However, the time warp sequence offered something that ordinary screenings could not contain. Fans wanted to dance, repeat the dialogue, dress as the characters, and respond directly to the screen. Midnight screenings changed everything. A commercial disappointment became a live audience ritual that continued for generations. Instead of simply surviving its poor opening, the Rocky Horror Picture Show transformed failure into participation and proved that a movie could become more powerful after viewers stopped sitting quietly. Number 18. The Wicker Man, 1973. Nothing about Sergeant Howie's arrival on Summerisle appears openly threatening. He has come to investigate the disappearance of a young girl, yet the islanders deny that she ever existed. Children are taught unusual lessons, celebrations follow unfamiliar traditions, and Lord Summerisle treats the officer's outrage as amusing proof that the visitor understands nothing. The great revelation arrives when Howie reaches the cliff and sees an enormous wooden figure standing above the sea. Every song, false clue, and local performance has guided him toward that structure. The scene is frightening because the islanders do not behave like people committing an evil act. They remain calm and convinced that their ceremony will save the harvest. A mishandled release and shortened versions prevented the film from reaching the audience it deserved. Over the following decades, horror fans recognized its bright daylight, folk music, religious conflict, and unforgettable conclusion as strengths. Today, The Wicker Man is considered one of folk horror's defining works. Its reputation demonstrates that darkness does not require night, and that cheerful faces can hide the most disturbing certainty. Still watching? Then tap like, share your favorite discovery in the comments, and subscribe before the countdown continues. Your support helps us rescue more overlooked classics from the forgotten corners of cinema. Number 17. Dead and Buried, 1981. A quiet seaside town should provide comfort, but Potter's Bluff feels like a beautiful postcard with something wrong beneath its surface. Visitors experience mysterious attacks, Sheriff Dan Gillis investigates, and familiar faces keep returning to the streets after they should have disappeared forever. The deeper he looks, the more the town's friendly routines appear rehearsed. One especially memorable scene follows an injured photographer lying helplessly in a hospital room. A smiling nurse approaches as though she intends to help him, but the encounter becomes a cold demonstration of how Potter's Bluff deals with outsiders. The practical effects and the nurse's calm expression make the sequence more disturbing than a loud surprise. The film made little money during its theatrical release and quickly vanished from cinemas. Its combination of detective mystery, coastal atmosphere, dark humor, and reanimated townspeople was harder to sell than a straightforward monster film. Home video gave viewers another opportunity. Fans began praising Stan Winston's effects, Jack Albertson's performance, and the final revelation involving the sheriff himself. Dead and Buried eventually became the kind of cult film passed from one horror collector to another, always accompanied by the same warning: never trust a town where everyone seems too pleased to see you. Number 16. The Thing, 1982. Isolation creates the first layer of fear before the creature even reveals what it can do. At an Antarctic research station, a group of men discovers an organism capable of copying any living being. Trust immediately collapses because every survivor understands that the person standing beside him may only look human. The most famous sequence begins as a medical emergency. A crewman's chest suddenly opens during treatment, trapping the doctor before a detached head attempts to escape by growing legs. The effects were astonishingly imaginative, but many viewers in 1982 reacted with disgust rather than admiration. Released during a summer in which audiences embraced a much friendlier visitor from space, John Carpenter's bleak story appeared cruel, hopeless, and excessive. Reviews were harsh, and the theatrical gross failed to meet expectations. Television and home video changed the judgment. Viewers could study the effects, follow the clues, and appreciate the film's careful exploration of paranoia. The final conversation between Macready and Childs continues to inspire theories, because the movie refuses to offer reassuring answers. The Thing is now regarded as a landmark of science fiction horror. Its transformation from rejected spectacle into recognized masterpiece remains one of cult cinema's greatest reversals. Number 15. The Hunger, 1983. Style arrives before explanation, as the band Bauhaus performs inside a nightclub filled with shadows, flashing lights, and elegant predators. Miriam promises her companions beauty and long life, but her promise contains a hidden limit. When John begins aging within hours, he learns that immortality can become a carefully decorated prison. The hospital waiting room scene remains one of the film's strongest moments. John sits among ordinary patients while decades race across his face. He begs for help, but nobody believes that time is destroying him in front of them. David Bowie's frightened performance turns aging into a visible nightmare. Audiences expecting a conventional vampire story instead received something slower, stranger, and more sensual. Its theatrical earnings were disappointing, and several critics attacked Tony Scott's direction as empty music video style. Later audiences understood that the style was part of the substance. The clothes, architecture, music, editing, and performances created a complete Gothic world. Catherine Deneuve's cold control, Susan Sarandon's transformation, and Bowie's rapid decline gave the film a lasting identity. Once dismissed as a triumph of appearance over meaning, The Hunger became an influential cult favorite. Its most frightening idea is simple. Living forever means very little when love, youth, and freedom are never guaranteed to last beside you. Number 14. Life Force, 1985. A mysterious spacecraft hidden near Halley's Comet contains 3 human-shaped beings sealed inside transparent containers. When the visitors are brought to Earth, they drain energy from anyone nearby and spread a plague that transforms London into chaos. The story moves from space exploration to vampire mythology, disaster cinema, and apocalyptic spectacle, without slowing down to ask whether those genres should belong together. The image most viewers remember is the apparently lifeless female visitor opening her eyes inside a research center. From that moment, guards and scientists become helpless around a being who appears calm while leaving destruction behind. Later, streams of glowing human energy rise over London as the entire city becomes part of the invasion. Cannon Films spent heavily, hoping Tobe Hooper would deliver a major science fiction event. Instead, Life Force earned roughly half its production budget worldwide and became a symbol of the company's uncontrolled ambition. Video audiences were far more welcoming. They embraced the practical effects, Henry Mancini's powerful score, and the fearless mixture of serious craftsmanship with pulp imagination. What appeared excessive in 1985 now feels wonderfully committed. Life Force became a cult legend because it never behaves like an embarrassed space vampire film. It presents every impossible idea with the confidence of a production that believes the end of London deserves an orchestra. Number 13. Invaders from Mars, 1986. A young boy wakes during a storm and watches a strange craft disappear behind the hill near his home. By morning, his father has changed. Soon his mother, teacher, police officers, and neighbors behave like people reading from the same hidden script. David notices marks on their necks and realizes that an invasion has already begun. The school sequence remains the film's greatest nightmare. His cruel teacher swallows a frog whole, then follows David through hallways that feel like an endless maze. Later, the alien control room reveals colorful creatures created with the physical imagination associated with practical effects cinema. The remake cost considerably more than it recovered. It arrived during a crowded summer, and critics compared it unfavorably with the 1950s original. Families may have found it too frightening, while older science fiction viewers saw it as childish. Cable television created another audience. Younger viewers connected with the fear of trusted adults becoming strangers, while effects fans admired the creature designs and exaggerated sets. The ending also kept arguments alive by refusing to make safety feel permanent. Invaders from Mars was dismissed as an unnecessary remake, but it became a recurring childhood memory for the people who discovered it at home. Its cult reputation survives, because few fears are stronger than waking up and realizing that your family remembers your name, but no longer feels like your family. Number 12. Night of the Creeps, 1986. Alien parasites crash to Earth, enter human bodies, and turn a college campus into a playground for creatures that refuse to stay still. Two socially awkward students accidentally release the preserved problem, forcing a weary detective to confront the same nightmare he witnessed decades earlier. The story combines science fiction, teen comedy, detective drama, and zombie horror. Its signature moment arrives when Detective Ray Cameron walks into danger carrying a flamethrower and delivers the film's most famous warning. The approaching college dance then becomes a chaotic final battlefield as infected students gather outside. Almost nobody saw the movie during its theatrical run. The domestic gross was extremely small, and the studio struggled to market a film built from several genres at once. Viewers could not tell whether they were being offered a comedy, an alien invasion, or a zombie picture. VHS solved the problem because rental audiences were willing to accept all three. Repeated viewings turned Tom Atkins's performance, the creatures, and Fred Decker's references to older horror films into fan favorites. Night of the Creeps eventually became less like a failed imitation and more like a celebration of the genre itself. It earned cult status because it understands that horror fans do not always want one flavor. Sometimes, they want detectives, spaceships, college romance, flamethrowers, and monsters in the same wonderfully crowded night. Number 11. Near Dark, 1987. A lonely young man sees May outside a small-town bar and assumes that the evening will end with a harmless kiss. Instead, she bites him shortly before sunrise and leaves him burning beneath the morning light. Caleb is pulled into her traveling family, a group of vampires who cross the American landscape in stolen vehicles without castles, coffins, or romantic speeches. Catherine Bigelow transforms the vampire story into a dusty western about loneliness and belonging. The bar sequence became the picture's calling card. Severin enters with a grin, insults everyone, and treats the room like a stage prepared for his amusement. What begins as uncomfortable humor becomes a demonstration of how easily the group controls ordinary people. Bill Paxton's performance is disturbing because Severin appears more interested in attention than survival. Released during the same year as The Lost Boys, this quieter and harsher vampire film could not compete with a larger campaign and more fashionable stars. Bigelow later connected its poor performance to that close competition and its more limited independent release. VHS viewers discovered a different kind of vampire family. Lance Henriksen's Jesse carries the authority of an exhausted outlaw. May offers Caleb both love and captivity, and Tangerine Dream's score makes every empty road feel haunted. The ending divides audiences because the story offers a possible cure, but that choice also gives the film its emotional purpose. Caleb must decide whether acceptance is worth surrendering the part of himself that still recognizes cruelty. Near Dark became a cult legend because it understands why dangerous families can appear attractive to lonely people. The vampires are frightening, but the promise of finally belonging somewhere is what makes their invitation difficult to refuse. Number 10. The Monster Squad, 1987. Every generation believes it discovered a great movie that everyone else ignored, and for children of the video store era, that film was often The Monster Squad. A group of young horror fans learns that Dracula has gathered Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and a creature from the lagoon. The monsters are searching for an ancient amulet capable of opening a portal that will allow darkness to control the world. The most quoted scene is short, comic, and essential. Two members debate whether the Wolfman has the same vulnerable anatomy as an ordinary man. The resulting discovery became the film's unofficial slogan. Yet the movie's strongest material is more emotional. Frankenstein's monster befriends young Phoebe, and their farewell gives the adventure a tenderness its advertising never promised. A large production budget created detailed monster designs, practical effects, and elaborate sets. Audiences still stayed away. The picture opened weekly, earned only a fraction of its cost, and disappeared before word of mouth could develop. It may have looked too frightening for small children and too childish for older horror audiences. Video shelves fixed that marketing problem. The cover immediately promised classic monsters, children, and adventure. Repeated rentals turned the dialogue, effects, and characters into a secret language shared by fans. Years later, anniversary screenings attracted enthusiastic crowds, while the documentary Wolfman's Got Nards examined the film's unexpected afterlife. The audience had finally arrived, just decades after the original release. The Monster Squad remains more than a nostalgia object. It understands that children love monsters, not simply because they are frightening, but because monsters are outsiders. Sometimes the creature everyone fears is also the one who most desperately needs a friend. Number 9. The Blob, 1988. A meteorite falls near a quiet American town, and a curious man discovers a small substance attached to it. Within minutes, the thing begins consuming whatever it touches, growing larger as local authorities search for explanations that sound less impossible. Teenagers Brian and Meg become unlikely survivors, but the true danger is not limited to the creature. A government team arrives with information suggesting that the disaster was created rather than discovered. The cinema sequence remains one of the remake's greatest set pieces. An audience watches a horror film, while the real threat moves through vents and beneath seats. The screen offers fake danger, yet nobody notices the genuine danger spreading around them, until escape becomes almost impossible. Another bold decision removes a character who appears to be the obvious hero. By breaking that expectation early, the film announces that age, popularity, and narrative importance will not protect anyone. The production used a budget large enough to create full-scale destruction, miniatures, and complex practical effects. Those effects still look disturbingly present because actors appear to be struggling against a physical mass. Despite generally positive attention, the film earned about $8 million against an estimated $10 million budget and was labeled a box office failure. Home video changed its position within horror history. Fans recognized the sharp script by Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont, the energetic pacing, and the complete lack of safety offered by the creature. It has no personality, sympathy, or understandable motive. It only grows. The government conspiracy also adds a bitter idea. Officials are willing to sacrifice an entire town to protect the potential value of a weapon. The people are not merely trapped between a monster and survival. They are trapped between the monster and the organization claiming to save them. The Blob is now often praised as a remake that matches or surpasses its predecessor. Its failed release is remembered less than its craftsmanship, proving that practical effects artistry can continue attracting audiences long after opening weekend reports have been forgotten. Number 8. Cat People, 1982. New Orleans becomes a humid dreamscape when Irena arrives to reunite with the brother she barely knows. Paul welcomes her with unsettling warmth, then explains that their family carries a secret. Intimacy can trigger a transformation into a panther, and returning to human form requires a fatal act. Irena rejects both the mythology and her brother's disturbing expectations, growing close to zoo curator Oliver, while fearing that desire itself may awaken something inside her. The swimming pool sequence demonstrates how the film builds tension through sound and space. Alice swims alone after dark while shadows move across the walls. A low growl echoes around the room, but the water prevents her from seeing what might be circling above. The scene honors the uncertainty of the 1942 original, even though the remake usually presents its transformations more directly. Paul Schrader was not interested in creating a simple creature feature. Giorgio Moroder's music, New Orleans architecture, strong colors, and dreamlike editing turned the story into a tragic meditation on identity, repression, and inherited rules. The production was expensive, and its theatrical performance disappointed studio expectations. Although its earnings approached the reported budget, distribution and promotional costs meant the film did not become the success its scale required. Time strengthened everything that once made it difficult to market. David Bowie's title song became inseparable from the atmosphere. Nastassja Kinski gave Irena vulnerability, without making her weak, and the final image of a panther behind bars provided a haunting answer to her impossible situation. Cult viewers now approach Cat People as an adult gothic romance. Its horror comes from the idea that love, freedom, and physical desire may never exist together. Irena's transformation is frightening, but her greatest tragedy is that every available choice requires her to surrender part of herself. Number 7. Return to Oz, 1985. Dorothy returns home from Oz and discovers that the adults around her treat her memories as symptoms of illness. Aunt Em takes her to a clinic where doctors plan to use an electrical procedure to remove the stories troubling her. A storm interrupts the treatment, and Dorothy escapes into a ruined version of Oz. The yellow brick road has been broken, the Emerald City has turned to stone, and her old friends have disappeared. She must travel with Tick-Tock, Jack Pumpkinhead, the Gump, and a talking hen while confronting Princess Mombi and the Gnome King. The story is closer in spirit to L. Frank Baum's later Oz books than to the famous musical adaptation. The Wheelers created the childhood nightmares that followed viewers for years. They have wheels instead of hands and feet, racing through empty streets while laughing behind alarming masks. Another unforgettable scene reveals Mombi's collection of removable heads, each displayed in a glass cabinet, until one awakens and alerts the others. Disney spent heavily on puppetry, stop-motion effects, sets, and fantasy design. Audiences expecting songs, bright colors, and reassurance instead found a medical institution, damaged landscapes, and villains who appeared genuinely dangerous. The film earned only a fraction of its reported cost in American theaters. Television and home video transformed its reputation. Children frightened by the movie returned as adults and discovered remarkable production design, Fairuza Balk's sincere performance, and a story about protecting memory from people who insist on controlling reality. The film never suggests that Dorothy should abandon imagination, Oz may be frightening, but it also allows her to preserve an essential part of herself. The adults want to cure her by removing the world she loves. The adventure teaches her that courage means refusing to let them define what is real. Return to Oz became a cult favorite because its darkness respects young viewers. It does not pretend fear is harmless, but it trusts children to move through that fear and emerge with their imagination intact. Number 6. Cemetery Man, 1994. Francesco Della Morte looks after a cemetery where the residents refuse to remain buried. 7 days after their funerals, they return, and Francesco quietly sends them back without asking why. His assistant Nagi accepts the routine with equal calm. The real complication begins when Francesco falls in love with a widow who repeatedly appears in different forms, each relationship blurring desire, death, coincidence, and madness. One unforgettable sequence combines romance with the cemetery's impossible rules. Francesco and the widow meet among graves, surrounded by moonlight and stone angels, while the boundary between love and death almost disappears. Later, accidents, mistaken identities, and repeated encounters push the story away from straightforward zombie comedy and toward a dream about a man losing confidence in reality. Internationally known as Della Morte Dellamore, the Italian production received only a very small American theatrical release under the title Cemetery Man. Marketing could not easily explain a film that moved from slapstick to romance, then from mystery to philosophical despair. Cult audiences embraced that instability. Michele Soavi's elegant camera work makes the cemetery beautiful without hiding its decay. The returning dead are sometimes frightening and sometimes funny, but the film's deeper concern is emotional repetition. Francesco keeps meeting the same woman, returning to the same duties, and searching for a world beyond the town. Number 5. The Frighteners, 1996. Death is only the beginning of the workload for Frank Bannister. Once an architect with a promising life, Frank can now see ghosts. He uses several friendly spirits to stage hauntings, then charges frightened homeowners to remove them. The dishonest business appears almost charming until a hooded figure begins marking living victims and collecting them one by one. Frank soon realizes that the new presence is connected to an old local tragedy and to the accusation that destroyed his reputation. Peter Jackson begins with broad supernatural comedy, then gradually moves the story toward darker territory. Ghosts argue like tired employees in one scene, while the next scene allows a shadowy figure to pass through walls and turn an ordinary room into a trap. The hospital sequence remains one of the strongest set pieces. Frank races through corridors while the supernatural attacker moves through solid surfaces, making every door and wall useless. Later, the story reaches an abandoned institution where damaged rooms preserve the past, and two smiling figures treat fear like a private form of entertainment. Expensive visual effects, an uncertain marketing campaign, and a release close to much larger summer attractions contributed to disappointing ticket sales. Peter Jackson later criticized advertising that failed to communicate what kind of film audiences were being offered. Television and home video gave The Frighteners the time theatrical schedules denied it. Viewers discovered Michael J. Fox's energetic performance, inventive effects, and an emotional story about guilt. Frank cannot defeat the haunting simply by learning its supernatural rules. He must confront the grief he has transformed into an identity. The movie became a cult favorite because its tonal changes finally make emotional sense. Comedy allows Frank to avoid pain, while horror forces him to face it. Beneath the ghosts and digital spectacle is a story about a man who believes surviving a tragedy makes him responsible for it. His real victory is not escaping death. It is deciding that he is still allowed to live. Number 4. Event Horizon, 1997. Something waits inside a missing spacecraft, but it is not an alien in the usual sense. 7 years after the Event Horizon disappears during an experimental voyage, the vessel suddenly returns near Neptune. A rescue crew boards it with the ship's designer, Dr. Weir, and discovers empty corridors, strange readings, and a gravity drive that may have opened a route beyond known space. The most famous discovery comes through a damaged video recording. At first, the images appear to be meaningless interference. When the crew improves the signal, they see brief fragments of what happened during the lost journey. The mission immediately changes from rescue to escape. Production difficulties heavily shaped the finished movie. The release schedule was accelerated, the edit was shortened, and disturbing material was removed before the film reached cinemas. Against a production budget estimated at around $60 million, Event Horizon earned less than half that amount domestically and became a significant financial disappointment. Home video provided a second launch. Audiences could pause the imagery, examine the vessel's cathedral-like design, and appreciate Lawrence Fishburne's performance as Captain Miller. His response after seeing enough evidence became one of the film's defining moments. Because he behaves exactly as viewers wish a horror character would behave. He recognizes the danger and decides they must leave. The deeper idea also aged well. The ship does not merely transport bodies through space, it transforms memory into a weapon. Each crew member sees private regret turned into a physical trap, while Weir becomes devoted to whatever exists beyond the gateway. Fans also became fascinated with the lost longer version, although much of the removed footage appears unlikely to be recoverable in usable condition. The missing material added another layer to the legend. Event Horizon eventually became a major example of cosmic horror and influenced later films and games. Its theatrical failure could not contain the power of its central question: what happens when human beings invent a doorway without understanding that something on the other side may have been waiting for them to open it? Number 3. Idle Hands, 1999. Responsibility has never interested Anton Tobias. The lazy teenager spends his time avoiding work, ignoring his parents, and trying to impress his neighbor Molly. Then he discovers that his right hand has developed a personality of its own and is responsible for the strange incidents spreading through town. His solution is perfectly suited to his character. He attempts to separate himself from the problem, only to make the possessed hand independent. The best-known sequence turns an ordinary kitchen into a slapstick battlefield. Anton fights his own arm using household objects, while his two recently departed friends watch, argue, and offer terrible advice. Their casual return from the afterlife defines the movie's tone. Nothing receives solemn treatment, including possession, death, or teenage panic. The film's theatrical release arrived during a sensitive period, and its marketing campaign was reduced. Audiences largely stayed away. It earned only about $4 million domestically against a reported $25 million budget, making it an obvious financial failure. The cast became central to its later appeal. Devon Sawa fully commits to Anton's physical comedy. Seth Green and Eldon Henson behave like cheerful undead roommates, while Jessica Alba gives Molly more confidence and humor than the basic role might suggest. The school dance finale turns the premise into a live-action cartoon. The hand searches for another host among costumed students, while Anton attempts to stop a threat that remains more competent without him. On video, the qualities that harmed the theatrical release became strengths. Viewers found the movie late at night, repeated its jokes, and passed it to friends who enjoyed horror without seriousness. Idle Hands did not fail because it lacked an identity. It failed because its identity was too unusual for the moment in which it was released. Its mixture of teen comedy, supernatural horror, loud music, and physical absurdity was perfectly designed for cult discovery, where nobody needed a trailer to explain why a detached hand chasing teenagers might be entertaining. Number 2. Ravenous, 1999. Hunger follows a group of soldiers through the snowy Sierra Nevada after the Mexican-American War, but the enemy is not another army. Captain John Boyd, haunted by the desperate act that saved his life, is transferred to remote Fort Spencer and introduced to a collection of outsiders. Their isolation ends when a stranger named Colquhoun tells them about travelers trapped in a cave and driven toward an unthinkable method of survival. A rescue party enters the mountains, and the stranger's performance slowly changes. Weakness becomes confidence, fear becomes amusement, and the story he told reveals itself as bait. The cave sequence turns a historical survival drama into a chase through frozen wilderness. Robert Carlyle's sudden energy makes Colquhoun frightening and darkly amusing. Guy Pearce plays Boyd as a man disgusted by the bravery others believe he demonstrated. Both characters understand hunger, but only one believes appetite should become a philosophy. The production was nearly as unsettled as Fort Spencer. A director was replaced, the tone remained difficult to classify, and marketing could not decide whether the film was a western, comedy, or horror picture. The estimated $12 million production earned only around $2 million domestically. What audiences missed was an unusually sharp story about appetite and conquest. Colquhoun claims that consuming another person transfers strength, then treats expansion as the natural result of becoming stronger. The film quietly connects personal hunger with national ambition. Damon Albarn and Michael Nyman's score makes the atmosphere even stranger by combining folk rhythms, military sounds, and playful unease. The music sometimes seems to laugh at the characters while they are still deciding whether the situation is terrifying. The final confrontation traps Boyd and Colquhoun together inside a mechanism designed for preservation. Survival requires Boyd to consider accepting his enemy's philosophy, giving the ending a bitter moral weight. Number 1. The Empty Man, 2020. For more than 20 minutes, The Empty Man barely resembles the movie advertised by its studio. 4 hikers in Bhutan discover an ancient skeleton hidden inside a mountain. One man hears a strange sound, falls into a trance, and sits before the remains while his friends become trapped by weather and fear. The prologue ends without a simple explanation, before the story suddenly jumps years forward to an American town. Former police officer James Lasombra is searching for a missing teenager whose friends performed an urban legend ritual on a bridge. They blew across an empty bottle and repeated a name, believing that a presence would find them over the following nights. The investigation leads from abandoned rooms to the Pontifex Institute, an organization whose followers speak about thought, form, identity, and the possibility of creating a human vessel through collective belief. The camp sequence is the moment that converted many skeptical viewers. James watches a large group moving around a fire in perfect synchronization. When he takes a step backwards, every figure stops. Then all of them turn towards him and begin running. The scene requires little explanation. Silence, scale, and timing create the fear. The film's theatrical release was almost designed to fail. It arrived in October 2020, when cinema attendance was severely limited and received very little promotion. The advertising made it resemble a routine teenage urban legend movie, while the actual film was a long cosmic detective story about consciousness and constructed reality. The final revelation changes every earlier scene. James's memories, grief, career, and identity may have been created only days earlier to produce the next vessel required by the organization. His investigation may not be the story of a man discovering a conspiracy. It may be the final stage of the conspiracy creating him. So which box office failure deserved success from the very beginning? And which cult legend are you watching next? These movies prove that opening weekends are temporary, but unforgettable ideas can survive for generations. Tell us which title you would rescue from cinema history, then like this video, share it with another horror fan, and subscribe for more forgotten classics. The theaters may once have been empty, but the final verdict belonged to the audiences who kept pressing play.